All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Medical School Headquarters MCAT event all about the summer. We are super, super excited to have you all joining us here today. So go ahead and say hello to us in the chat so that we can see who's here and see what's going on in your minds. I'm going to put a couple polls up on the screen so that you can start to answer those. Number one, what's your biggest concern about the MCAT as an exam? So if you have a minute, type that in, let us know. I'd love to kind of know what's on your mind and where you're at and kind of what that worry is. And then after we're done with that one, I'll ask you when you're planning on taking the MCAT, and we'll take it from there. So take a second or so, type the answers in for this one, and we'll kind of get that to gauge what's going on here today. My name is Patrick Manassi. I'm the Vice President for Test Prep and Tutoring here at Med School Headquarters. Super excited. I've been in the MCAT world, working with students, working with programs, building programs, helping students basically achieve the goal of wearing a white coat for the last 25 years, and very, very thrilled to now be part of the Med School Headquarters family, really building out what will become the premier MCAT preparation option for students, and really creating lots and lots of free resources, free content, including events like what we're doing here tonight to get the information into your hands, really to democratize the information available as far as what's going on in terms of the MCAT and how you can be better preparing for that as far as your preparation, as far as kind of where you're at in the journey as a whole. At the same time, this is an event that is ultimately designed for you. So I look forward to getting your questions answered here tonight, and really covering off on these four kind of main themes. Number one, why the summer is this ideal time to be studying and preparing for the MCAT, how to be thinking about your overall preparation plan, your overall study plan, kind of how to build it, really not just how to build it, but how to also adjust it and to tweak it as you're working through the material. And then at the same time, where to be focusing on and what to be focusing on as far as your study time is concerned. And then, of course, the inevitable when it comes to summer, sometimes we think, oh, we have all this free time because, especially if you're in school, I don't have classes to worry about. But then there are these competing obligations that start to come into play, and then that starts to deter from the larger kind of task at hand, which of course is preparing for the MCAT and getting yourself ready as far as the application is concerned. So, really kind of looking at all those pieces, as it were. I'll close out the first poll now, and now I'm going to just put up a poll to see when everybody's planning on taking the MCAT itself. So if you can just put your answers in there. If you don't know yet, just choose 2026 and beyond. That's totally fine as well, but I'm sure some of you might already be thinking, oh, I already know that you're taking the exam in a given month. I see a lot of Augusts coming in and a lot of 2026s. So you're in the right place is what it is. So take a moment and respond to those as it were. So if you've got questions, by all means, ask them away. That's what today is for. This is, again, a session designed for you. We don't have a very fancy PowerPoint in any way, so it's not like we're going to be going through a series of slides and reading off to you. This is really more of an open discussion, a workshop, if you will, to cover off on these topics. And I'll impart on you what I know and what advice I can give you to kind of get you going as far as your preparation itself is concerned. All right, so that's what we have in store for us for the next 50 minutes or so. So I see that August and 2026 are kind of the two big drivers, the two big answers here on this poll. So I'll go ahead and close out this poll, and we can kind of dive into what we mean by all these things as far as your summer and your summer MCAT prep is concerned. So the first question: why is summer an ideal time to study for the MCAT? And really, it comes down to the very, very simple fact that there are fewer obligations of your time over the summer, right? So this is not, anything surprising, right? Especially if you're, in school. Of course, during the summer, You don't necessarily have those classes. You don't have that competing time. So it really gives you an opportunity to kind of step away from everything and really put a very, very strong emphasis on to the MCAT preparation. The MCAT, of course, as an exam, it's not an easy exam, right? No one has ever woken up and said, "Oh, the MCAT, that's a piece of cake. I have a problem in studying for it. It's just it's a simple thing that I have to do." No, the MCAT, it's a tough exam. It is an exam that is difficult, but at the same time is actually the most preparable of the exams that exist for entrance into various professional programs. And so while it is considered to be one of the most difficult exams, it is the most preparable exam, namely because of the fact that what is fair game for the MCAT is all published, right? There's nothing hidden. There's no secret as far as, what information they could test you on, or and quite frankly, also they tell you what they can't test you on. By telling you what they can test on, they tell you what they can't test you on. So really, from your perspective as a preparer for this thing, it's all about making sure that you can start to build out some good structure. And it's that structure that I really want to kind of take a deep dive into here today, because I feel like, at least in my experience through all these years, in prepping literally thousands and thousands of students, it's the structure that oftentimes where students kind of lose the battle, right? They lose the battle not because they did something wrong per se, but they just didn't do it in the best way possible for their time frame. And so when we look at the summer with this kind of reduced number of obligations, we have this freedom, but this freedom comes with its own problems, because when you have freedom, then it's very easy to procrastinate. So who would agree with that statement that by human nature, we tend to procrastinate, or we're good at procrastinating? Who would kind of give me a thumbs up on that, or just say, yeah, that's, I see how that can be a thing. You can use that in the use the introduce yourself chat to kind of give me a response on that. If we we tend to procrastinate. I see a couple thumbs ups coming through. So it's not it's not normal, right? We're very good at being procrastinators. We're very good at kind of putting things off, or quite frankly, running into the problem of, oh, it's fine, I've got the whole week to do this, I'll just do this tomorrow, right? I'll just do this tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes today, and then today becomes another tomorrow, and all of a sudden we fall into this, quite frankly, this little bit of a snowball effect where we are now way behind, and we say, well, we had all this time in the summer, why didn't we just do the work that we should have been doing to begin with? So there's an idealism to summer, which gives us that kind of blank slate, gives us a lot of time, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're actually building out some structure to it. Now, part of the advantage that you have preparing for the MCAT over the summertime also comes down to the fact that your head is clear of other academic obligations, right? So when you're thinking about this in terms of kind of the amount that your brain, we'll just use that term, can handle, the cognitive load is really the true kind of learning science term to think about. The cognitive load, as far as how much work you can be doing, how much studying you can be doing, when you're trying to balance classes, volunteer work, right, clinical hours, all the other things that you do as a pre-med, clubs that you're part of, other extracurriculars, other hobbies, sports that you might be playing, all of that becomes very competing, and oftentimes the MCAT ends up on the back burner. But we don't have that problem as much in the summertime, because we've removed one of the major obstacles, and that obstacle, of course, being the class time and the work that you need to be doing for school. Now, during the school year, that should be your priority, because you don't get a second chance at taking a class, right? If you're struggling in a class, you need to be putting focus on the class, because that's going to be a grade that's going to show up in your GPA, that's going to be part of the overall application, and that's going to be something that the medical school admissions officers are going to be looking at quite closely, right? They're not going to be saying, oh, it's okay, it was during the school year, right? They're going to look at those numbers real closely. Obviously, in an ideal world, we're able to balance the classes and the MCAT, but sometimes reality sets in and we can't necessarily do that. Summer kind of takes away one of those cognitive loads that can get added into our system. And so therefore, we can spend more time actually spending the time studying for this exam and kind of really dedicating ourselves to that information and to that work. What that means, though, for you is to make sure that you are, in fact, taking a very, very strategic approach to studying for this exam. And here's what I mean by this. I get asked this question more oftentimes than any other, and that is, how much time should I be studying for the MCAT? And the reality is there are numbers that are published, right? If you look at the AMC data, they'll say that, the average student reports that they study for around 240 hours for the MCAT. So they say something to the effect of they studied an average of 12 hours per week and 20 hours per week. So that gives you 240 hours, and that's the average. And then you say to yourself, well, I want to be above the average, so I got to study for more than 240 hours, right? That's a number, right? That is a number as far as the amount of time. It's not about the number of hours. It is about the effectiveness of those hours. Really making sure that every single minute that you are spending studying for the MCAT is as effective as possible. And what we mean by this is very, very simple. I could open up a chemistry textbook and review every single chapter that could be tested on the MCAT. And I could, check off the box and say, I studied for 20 hours this week because I read that textbook from, first page to last page. Or I could be doing practice problems. And I can say I did 20 hours of practice problems. And I can check off that box and say that I studied for 20 hours this week. But neither of those two are actually the most effective use of your time. The most effective use of your time would be to do some practice problems, use the outcomes of those practice problems to determine what content areas you need to go back to, right? Which areas you'd say, okay, you know what? I thought I knew my thermodynamics. I really don't know my thermodynamics. I got to go back. I got to watch a YouTube video. I got to find some resources online. I got to go to Wikipedia, right? I got to go somewhere to fill in that content knowledge, go and study that content knowledge, and then go back and do some more practice with those questions. Or even more so, you're like, you know what? I'm good on the content, but this answer choice tripped me up. Anyone ever have that problem? Especially if you've taken some, practice tests, right? It's not that you didn't know the information. It's that you got tricked by one of the answer choices. The MCAT is very good about doing that. They've got 4 answer choices for every question. One of them is correct. 3 of them are incorrect, but the 3 that are incorrect for very, very specific reasons. So it's not just about the amount of time that you're spending. It's about the effectiveness of the time that you're spending and making sure that you are not falling into a pattern that you feel good about, but isn't actually showing you results, isn't actually showing you the outputs that you want to be finding. So here's my first piece of advice to you. And I want you to write this down, and I want you to never forget this. And that is that when you are studying for the MCAT, you want to, I'll even say you need to feel uncomfortable, right? You always need to feel challenged. You always need to feel uncomfortable as you're studying through this material. Because if you're not feeling uncomfortable, what that means, very simply put, is that you're not challenging yourself, right? We are very, very good at doing things that we are good at. Who would agree with that statement, right? We like to do things that we're good at, right? I enjoy, painting, so I'm going to paint, right? I enjoy building things, so I'm going to build more things. I don't enjoy gardening, so I'm not going to garden, right? This is how our mind operates. The same is true when it comes to your MCAT preparation, right? If you're good at a certain subject, you're going to want to keep doing that subject. But you're going to sit there and go, hey, Petros, what's going on? My score's not improving. And I'm going to say, yeah, your score's not improving because you've maxed out the number of points that you can get on that area, right? The MCAT only has so many questions about thermodynamics, or so many questions about Pascal's principle, whatever it might be. So you have to force yourself to get in this uncomfortable place. This comes back to the summer in a way. In the summer, when you kind of have that freedom of time, right? You have a little bit more time, a little more mind space, a little more relaxed, slightly more relaxed. The weather's nicer, right? If anything, the weather's slightly nicer. What's happening is, very simply put, you are able to say to yourself, I'm going to allow for more of this kind of freedom to really force myself to be thinking about all of the things that I need to be focusing on without allowing yourself to be distracted by all of the other stuff that's going on around you, right? So you kind of, it gets easier for you to feel uncomfortable, because if you're under a stressful situation when it's, during the school year and you're like work, right? Schoolwork, it's so easy for you to want to fall into this trap of, well, you know what? I'm doing my MCAT stuff and I'm feeling good about it. So I'm just going to keep doing the things that I feel good about. And then what ends up happening is you don't actually end up seeing the results that you want to be seeing. All right. So that's kind of advice number one. There'll be more advice as we go along the way. Again, if you've got questions, just ask them away, right? This is not, this is again, like, I can talk all day about this stuff, but it's really about making sure that you get your questions answered. So if you got a question, put them in the chat. Love to help you on them and get those answered for you, as it were. All right. So that's kind of area number one. Area number two, when we look at kind of how we're thinking about the approach for the MCAT, comes down to the fact that it's really, really easy. And for those of you that have already studied for this thing, or let's be blunt, we've all been thinking about this at some point. Who gets fixated on the score? Who's like got that score fixation that you're just like worried about that number, right? Did I get a 501 or a 520 or a 510, right? We get fixated on that number. Who give me a thumbs up if you've ever had one thought. And if you say you've never had a thought about getting fixated on the score, then you're probably not being truthful to yourself, is what it comes down to, right? It's so easy to get fixated on the number, okay? Here's my second piece of advice for you. And this is also relevant to the summer, and I'll show you why here in a second. I'll tell you why in a second. Do not fixate on your MCAT score, okay? It's like the hardest thing that you're going to ever hear anybody tell you. If anyone tells you otherwise, they're lying to you. Trust me when I say this, all right? Do not fixate on the number. What you should be fixating on is getting more questions right. It's real simple advice, but it is 100% the best advice that you're ever going to get. And I'm not saying that because I'm saying that to you, right? It is literally the mindset that you need to give yourself. How can I get more questions right? Right? How do I get more questions right? What did I do on this question that forced me to get it wrong? What do I need to be doing differently so that I get it right next time? If you get more questions right, the scores will improve, right? The scores will go up. And the reason why this works, and the reason why your kind of mindset should be in this fashion, really comes down to the fact, and Carolyn, I'll get to your question here in a second, for sure. That's a great question. The reason why this works as far as the mindset is concerned is that if we get fixated on the number, then all we're ever thinking about is that number, as opposed to the actual process, the actual kind of work that needs to be done to get ourselves to the next level, right? To move yourself upwards. With the MCAT, it is not a linear progression as far as score improvement is concerned. In fact, never will you see a perfect like straight line. If your friends tell you, oh, I started studying for the MCAT and I scored a 501 initially, and then the next week I got a 505, and then the next week I got a 507, and the next week I got a 509, and I just kept taking a practice test every week. I went 2 points up, and now I'm at a 520. They're probably lying to you, okay? Because that's not how it works, right? Trust me on this. It does not work that way. The way that it works, as far as your MCAT goes, is the scores improve in plateaus. So you kind of go up, and then you kind of plateau out, and you go up again, and then it plateaus out, goes up again, and plateaus out. I'm going to get real nerdy on you here for a second. Who remembers phase changes? Remember phase changes from your chemistry classes, right? Good old phase changes. Phase changes, perfect analogy to how your scores improve, right? You're putting energy into the system during the phase change. You don't see a change in the temperature, right? The temperature stays exactly the same. If I take a cube of ice, I put it into a glass of water, I measure the temperature, it will be 0 degrees Celsius. And it will be 0 degrees Celsius for quite some time as that ice is melting into the rest of the water. There's nothing wrong with my thermometer. It's just that a phase change is happening. Energy is being moved from one place to the other. Same thing is true for the MCAT. As you're going through these plateaus, what's effectively happening is that your mind is making adjustments, right? You're not seeing the outcome yet because all these different pieces are starting to fall into place. And the reason why this becomes important as far as the summertime is concerned comes down to the fact of time, right? If we're having this conversation today in April and you're testing, 3 weeks from now, we don't have that luxury of time to allow for some of these things to just literally click, right? I mean, that's really just part of it, is that you just need to have things start to click and really synthesize and come together. And so, you couple that kind of with that reduction in cognitive load, you couple that with this notion of how to be approaching the exam and thinking about it from the perspective of getting more questions right. And you take those pieces, you add in the layer of having all this time, what you start to have is a very perfect recipe for success on this exam, because now you have the two kind of major factors that have been diminished, right? The cognitive load has been taken away, and you've added in this amount of this extra time that comes into play. As you're going through questions, and as you're working through questions in this kind of quest to get more things right, to get more questions correct, I want you to remember this bit of advice, and that is on any multiple choice exam. This is true whether it's the MCAT or your DMV driver's license exam. On any multiple choice exam, whenever you choose an incorrect answer, when you choose a wrong answer, I want to make sure I say that right. When you choose a wrong answer, you've actually made two mistakes. The first mistake you've made is you were attracted to the wrong answer, right? You were wooed by it. It seduced you, right? It said something to you, and you were like, yes, I'm going to choose you. And you rejected the correct answer, right? You turned around and said, oh, I don't think you're right. I don't think you're the person that I want to choose as my right answer. So you've made two mistakes. The better you can get at identifying what those two errors are, the better off you're going to be in the long run, right? And so really kind of training yourself as you're going through those and going through this process, really, really important for you to keep that in mind. Carolyn and Ellie have some good questions I want to answer before we talk about building a study plan, because I think it'll actually flow quite nicely with those. So Carolyn asks, any tips for non-traditional pre-meds, graduated 7 years ago, did all the pre-med courses, you're working full-time. So yeah, here's the tip that I'll give you. One, congratulations, right? One, for, finishing everything, but at the same time for working full-time and going, I won't say going back to this, but, continuing this process, right? Everybody has different timelines as far as journey is concerned. I think the first step for anyone in that situation, if you're a number of years removed from the content, is going to be to get good content review, but applicable content review. The MCAT never actually, it's weird. It's a fascinating exam. I'm going to get real nerdy about this exam in a minute here. It's an exam that never will actually reward you just for knowing content. It's an exam that will only reward you for knowing how to apply the content. So as you're going through kind of your content review, it's really easy, and this is true for everybody. So this is advice for all, regardless of where you are in your journey. It's really easy to get kind of caught in this content review cycle where you're just like, I'm going to review content. I feel good about myself. I'm doing something. And really what ends up happening is you're doing work, you're doing busy work, but you're not doing effective busy work. It goes back to that notion I was saying earlier as far as being effective as far as your study time is concerned. So regardless, though, you're going to want to make sure that you have good, solid content review. And so what that's going to mean is, one, familiarizing yourself with the material that is fair game on the MCAT, because you will have learned more, especially, I mean, so you mentioned that you have a undergrad degree in chemistry. You've learned more chemistry than will ever be tested on the MCAT. I can assure you of that, right? Even if you didn't have an undergrad in chemistry, you will have learned more physics and chem than they're going to actually test you on the exam. The MCAT, it's very broad topics, but very shallow as far as the depth in which it will go. So you have to be kind of aware of what the content is. So get yourself well situated with the material from the AMC. It's all available for free on their website, right? As far as what's tested and what's not tested. Get some good content review in, and get started familiarizing yourself with the test structure, and get yourself just doing some questions, right? Just getting some practice questions in as it goes. If you're working full time, there's going to be more of a balancing act. And this is also true if you're in school full time, right? But I mean, either way, if you're working or you have a fuller schedule, or is it more full or fuller? Either one, whatever the grammar is. There's no grammar on the MCAT per se. If you have a busier schedule, let's use that one, then you're going to need to space out your preparation over a longer period of time, right? So if you haven't picked up on my philosophy on things, you need to make sure that you fit the MCAT prep into your life, but also that it doesn't take over your life, right? So if you are working full-time, great, wonderful. Don't also try to do this full-time, because then you have two full-time jobs all of a sudden, right? So you have to kind of create a good balancing act. And that's something that we can help you with. Like, we help you figure out what that balancing act is. We'll talk about a little bit about that today with, building out the overall study plan. But that's, I think, part of that delicateness, if you will. So Carolyn, if you need more on that, feel free to follow up. But that's the kind of initial response that I would give you to your question. So if you got more, love to hear it. Ellie asks if it'd be more beneficial to study in the same places and the same times to simulate a class environment when studying, or is it more beneficial to utilize novelties, whether that be locations for greater information retention to keep yourself motivated throughout the summer? That's a great question, I think. So I'll tell you a life story. I like telling stories. Hopefully everybody is ready for it. Everybody okay with me telling a story? Because I like to tell stories. The first class I took in college was a Psych 1A class, so Intro to Psych. And it was a wonderful professor who, before our first exam, she said the best place to study for an exam is in the room that you're going to take the exam. Okay. Now this was, 20 odd years ago or so. And so, life was a little different. It wasn't, we didn't have as much virtual as it were. And so lo and behold, the night before the first midterm exam, every single student, or at least half of the class maybe, was in that lecture hall studying for the exam. It just, this was it was actually during the summertime. It was the campus was relatively open, right? So it wasn't, again, this was 20 odd years ago. Life was a little bit different. And everybody was in that lecture hall studying for the exam, because our professor had said the best place that you can study for an exam is in the lecture hall that you can study, that you're going to be taking the exam. So, take that advice. Yes, it's always best for you to be able to kind of replicate that as possible. Unfortunately, so Ellie, this is where the bad side of the story goes. You're not going to be able to do that, right? You can't go to the MCAT testing center. They won't let you. You can't go there and say, "Hi, I'm taking the MCAT in 2 months. I want to study here," right? They won't let you do that. But what you can do, and what you need to do, is you need to create for yourself a distraction-free, dedicated study space. And what I mean by that is, as much as you can, I know it's not necessarily possible for everyone, but as much as you can, you want to have a space that the only thing that you do in that space is study for the MCAT. And the reason I say that is it's psychological, right? It's a bit of a mindset thing, where if you're in a space where, especially these days, right? We all have our phones within arm's reach, right? If you don't have your phones within arm's reach right now, right? You're probably lying to yourself, is what it comes down to. We all have our phones within arm's reach. Our friends can message us, our family can message us, right? There's distractions galore between, I don't know, Instagram or whatever social media you choose to follow, right? TikTok, whatever it might be, your friends texting you or messaging you, right? Whatever it is, we got lots of distractions. So you need to create a space that is literally distraction free, including if you're sitting on your laptop, right? I mean, on my laptop, right? I get my text messages on my laptop. I mean, I've got the same app on my phone as I've got on my laptop. So if somebody texts me, I get it on my phone and I get it on my laptop, I'm going to see their message. So if you're studying for the MCAT, this is like real technical advice. I'm not a technical person per se. Create another profile on your computer, right? Like create literally another, user on your computer that is your MCAT user. That way you can not load up your text messages and not load up your other distractors that, that could be there when you're sitting on your laptop. If it's in your home, like try to have it be in a place that the TV's not there, whatever, like create that as much as possible. That being said, summer is a good time. So it's kind of like the answer that has both sides to the story. Summer's a great time where you can kind of change things up. I had a couple students years ago now, but it was 3 students. They were all from the East Coast. I live out in California. This was back when I was teaching classes in person. There were 3 friends. They had all traveled from the East Coast to the West Coast. They'd never been to the West Coast before. They knew no one here except for the 3 of them. And they'd come just to study for the MCAT because they wanted to be completely away and completely isolated from everybody that they knew. And they all did very well. They all got into med school, right? I'm not saying that you have to do that. They just used it as kind of an excuse to go somewhere else for the summer. So that being said, I'll also leave it at do what is best for you, right? So if you need to be in a place where you can kind of get away and, take a moment here and there, do that, right? Whatever will get you motivated to kind of keep going. If there's, we're very responsive as humans to carrots, right? So if there's a carrot you can give yourself, like if I do this work, then I'll get to go here for the weekend. That's always a great way to look at it as well. What I will also say, because I realize I've been talking for the last 30 minutes about like study over the summer, make sure you take breaks over the summer too, right? Just because you have all this free time doesn't mean you should be studying the whole time. Like building breaks into your overall study plan for the MCAT, really, really important, right? There's nothing better than taking breaks. And when I say breaks, I mean take breaks kind of during the day, right? Even your study block shouldn't be longer than 50 minutes. So like do 50 minutes, 10-minute break, 15 minutes, 10-minute break, right? There's a reason why most college classes, even though they're advertised for an hour, are only 50 minutes long because you need to take a break. And also because you need to get from one classroom to the other sometimes, but like there's a reason for that. So make sure you incorporate breaks into your day. And then make sure you incorporate at least one day off, like one complete day off per week, right? So that you're just doing nothing that's MCAT related, so that you can give your mind a rest. Because this is what I have found through the years is that the students that don't take breaks, who feel like they're doing something, right? I'm going to get passionate about this because I'm very passionate about this issue. The students who are like, I'm not going to take any breaks because I'm going to keep studying. They actually, their efficiency drops off. So while they might look like a busybody and they're doing all this work, their efficiency and their ability for output is actually dropping off and tapering off over time, which is absolutely horrible. And they're like, why am I not getting the results that I want to be getting? Well, because you're not taking breaks, right? So part of this like overall plan as far as the summer is concerned is really to make sure that you are thinking of all the things, right? Including the break time that is there. As far as if there are questions, by all means, let us know. Ellie and Carolyn, you're very welcome. I'm glad the advice is helpful. So makes me want to wake up tomorrow morning and do this again, right? The key with building out the study plan and building out kind of everything is a couple things. So here's kind of where we like advice bit number 4. In your early days of studying, you're going to be doing more content reading. Okay. That's not to say you're only going to be doing content review, but early days you're going to be doing more content review. You should not be taking full-length exams. You should not be taking like long section tests early days, right? The only full-length exam that you might take early on is a diagnostic exam, right? Just to see kind of where you're at. In fact, that should be the first thing that you do. So the AMC, they've got great practice tests. I mean, they are the people that write the MCAT. Their questions are going to be the most realistic. Anyone who says otherwise cannot be saying the truth, because they are, the AMC is the people that write the exam, right? So take one of their exams, get a diagnostic, see how you do. Or if you're taking the real MCAT, that can be your diagnostic, right? Kind of where you stand, if you will. But early days are going to be more content review, but you need to mix that in a little bit with question practice, right? Because remember what I said earlier, the MCAT is all about application, right? That's how they reward you, is the actual application of the material, the application of the sciences. As your days go on, your content review is going to taper off, and your practice problems and practice questions, that's going to be increasing, right? It's going to increase over time. And quite frankly, the questions that you're doing should at some point, kind of halfway through, start to dictate what content it is that you're reviewing. It's important for you to be building a plan. And I love it when students come and say, I've got this plan. I'm like, great, let's tear it apart, because you're not going to end up with that plan, right? You go in with a plan, and if you go in with the mindset of, I've got the plan and I'm going to stick to this plan, then what ends up happening is you are kind of limiting yourself to how you need to be thinking about this, right? You need to build a plan, but part of the building of the plan needs to be the plan is going to be adjusted. And that adjustment really is where to focus your study time kind of caveat comes into play. You need to allow for your performance to be dictating where and when you need to be spending time on certain things. And I'll give you a very real example that maybe has happened to you. Anybody ever have a panic moment when you're in class, right? All of a sudden there's like one question that you just don't understand, or one concept you don't understand, and the midterm or the final is a couple of days away, and you like panic and you start only studying that one thing because you're gonna have to understand that one thing, right? Does that resonate with anyone, that you've had that moment, that panic moment? See a couple thumbs up, right? So this is normal, right? This is very, very normal that we have these panic moments. It's very true on the MCAT. We have these panic moments where we think, oh, the world is ending. I don't understand this one concept. You have to force yourself to not let those panic moments dictate everything. Because what will end up happening is you will like completely shift gears and only focus on that one thing. And all of a sudden what ends up happening is you have now studied this one thing, and you've studied it ad nauseum, and then it never shows up on the exam again, right? So you have to be very, very nimble as far as where to be putting the focus and where to be doing the things that you need to be doing. So knowing where to focus your study time, knowing kind of when to acknowledge that it's time to move to something or to move on to something else, or to like leave something behind because you've mastered that, is going to be a big part of it for certain. Now, there are a couple more questions that came through, so I want to make sure I get to those. There are two chats here, so I'm sorry I missed a few because they were in the other chat that I didn't have open. So Scott asked. So Scott, hopefully you're still here. What have you seen with students taking a light load during the spring of their junior year and taking the MCAT in March, April of their junior year? I've seen great success with that. That also works, right? You can totally do that. And the way to do it, if you're going to take the exam not in the summer, or not prep for the exam over the summer, is you just start earlier, right? I mean, I don't want to sound like too simple about it, but that's the reality. Is okay, you're going to test in March or April, totally fine. Just start in October, right? Don't start in January and want to test in March, right? Start in October, start in September, and get ready for the exam in March or April, right? If you're junior, like that's totally fine, right? Totally with the way to the way to do it. Pam had a good question. How many months should I plan on studying before my January 26 exam? We'll be doing clinical in the fall, which is great. out of commission from mid-July through mid-August. Should I begin studying in June, knowing I'll be taking a month? You can. I mean, there's nothing wrong with kind of getting a little bit of a jump start, right? Nothing wrong with doing some like content review, just getting yourself familiar with the exam, right? That's totally fine. If you're going to be doing clinical in the fall, and you're going to, probably have a pretty heavy load as far as that time commitment is concerned, I would say, again, give yourself, ideally 5 to 6 months before the January exam. So you can basically start in June, take your July and July to mid-August period that you're going to be out of commission, take that out of the equation, and then kind of get back into it in, let's call it September. You got September, October, November, December, a little bit of January, and you're going to be set to go. That's what it comes down to. So definitely a way to make it happen is what it comes down to. So there's no problem with starting early. That's what it comes down to. As far as effective content review, that's a great question. Ellie, I'm really actually happy you asked that question. So actually the way you asked it is you said, I struggle with passively reading the content, but not feeling like I'm retaining information. And in 4 weeks when I'm done with the content review, I don't want to not remember yet. So you're not alone. Effective content review comes down to using the material immediately, right? I can tell you today how to, I don't know, pick a subject, right? How to build something, right? I can tell you until the evening is done about how to do something. But if you don't actually go and do it, you're going to forget it, right? That's just the reality. So, utilizing Anki is a great way to kind of retain that information. Utilizing, practice questions at large is a great way to utilize that information, or to use that information, I should say, to help you retain that information. The last thing you want to be doing, though, is doing content review for a 4-week stint without doing any type of application practice, right? The content review is only as effective as the application of that material. So I would strongly encourage that to be the way to look at it. Raphael, how much of the science program should be completed before one should consider starting a study for the MCAT? You should at least complete the chemistry, most of the OChem, depending on your school, right? Depending on what is covered in your OChem classes. The biochem for certain. Physics, the first part. So E&M, you can get away with not having parts of it, but I would say even that you should have. So basically the science prereqs should be done before the MCAT. The psych-soc, that one is a little trickier. And the reason for that is the behavioral sciences, depending on your school, that material, some schools, it's crazy. Some schools, the topics on the MCAT, they're like covered over 5 or 6 different courses. You should not be taking 5 or 6 different courses just for the sake of studying for the MCAT. You can study that stuff on your own, right? That you can definitely be studying on your own. Some of the stuff in the physics and some of the stuff in OChem, you can kind of learn that yourself as you're going through studying for this exam. And we can help you with that with our tutors. So that's definitely something that we're doing. That we're doing right now, actually. So that's so you can definitely get that kind of covered as it were. Vedanga, is that upper division biochemistry? Tell me the answer to that before I answer your question, because it does change my answer. And then as far as a time period or a time frame that's entirely too long, there is such a thing as studying for the MCAT for too long. And that is, if you're just so everyone works at a different pace. I acknowledge that. I work at different paces, right? I work slower at some things, faster at other things. Everyone works at a different pace. Everyone needs to work at their pace. But what you don't want to have happen to you. So I won't give you the answer to the time frame, Layla, per se. And here's the reason why. It would be unfair of me as an educator to say, oh, if you study for the MCAT for more than a year, that's too long. Or if you study for less than 2 months, that's too short, right? It'd be unfair of me to say that. What I will say, though, is you have to be careful of yourself. Not you, Layla, per se, just us humans in general. It's so easy to procrastinate this exam and to postpone this exam, right? So what you don't want to have happen to you is that the MCAT just becomes this lingering thing that just is this thing that's just always with you and it just won't go away, and you're just like, just go away. Like you don't want it to be that, which is why it's so important to say, okay, here's my test date, here's when I'm going to start, I'm going to build a plan, and I'm working towards that plan. If for some reason the plan does not go to plan, then yes, we discuss alternatives. We, discuss alternative test dates, right? All those things. Like that's totally fine. So, from that perspective, I will say if you're like doing 3 years or 2 years of continuous MCAT studying, I would have hoped that you and I, not you and I, but you know what I'm saying? Like we had a conversation, earlier than that, right? So if you find yourself kind of in this point where, okay, it seems to be taking too long, like that's when we really should be having a conversation to kind of figure out what's causing that, because that's the last thing you want to be doing. You won't have that luxury in med school, right, to procrastinate. So Raphael, as far as the accelerated programs are concerned, as long as you, so I think this is where you need to look at your coursework and compare the coursework for your program against what's being tested on the MCAT and kind of see where the gaps are going to be. So that would be, without the program that you're in and the coursework that you have, I couldn't give you a solid answer, but like that's where I would look at it. Raquel, Raquel or Rachel, tell me which one it is so I don't mess up. As far as doing well in the MCAT without taking any biochemistry, let's put it like this. Biochemistry is a big part of the MCAT. It was added into the MCAT 10 years ago for a very specific reason. That being said, it is very specific as far as what biochemistry is actually tested on the MCAT. So again, getting yourself familiar with that or getting, tutoring specifically in that area is going to be helpful for you along the way, to make sure that you get the material right. Because it is definitely more advanced than the biochemistry you would see in an intro or a general Bootcamp course. So that's that. That's where I would put it. Scott, as far as what we recommend, if you register for the MCAT in October with a test date in March, if you aren't scoring where we like to leading up to the exam, what would you recommend we do? I think it would depend on when you weren't scoring where you would like to be scoring. If it's January, I would say keep studying. If it was, March 1st and you're, 10 points away, then we start to talk about reconsideration options. Here's the thing. I'm picking up on something here. And I want to make sure that we are all kind of on the, on the same page. The thing about kind of figuring out where you're at is all avoidable, or figuring out kind of whether you're going to need to postpone and all that is all avoidable with good guidance and with a good plan, right? That's really, I think, kind of going to be a big part of it, is making sure that you kind of have that guidance along the way, which is going to mean like frequent check-ins with an expert, right? The last thing you want to be doing is kind of trying to go it alone, and then when it's too late, I mean, unfortunately, those are some of the conversations I have every day. Like I had some of those today, right? Students are like, I've been studying for this thing on my own, and I'm not seeing my score improve. When's your MCAT? Later this month, or next month. And I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. Let's figure out what the where we need to go with you, as far as what the plan is going to be. So making sure that you kind of have milestones to check in with is going to be that's an important part to to kind of keep in mind, as it were. Couple other questions here. How long should the content review in early days last before taking the test? Again, you're always going to be reviewing content. It's just the intensity that you're reviewing content that's going to kind of diminish over time, right? So early on, it's going to be more intense. Later on, it's going to be as needed, is what it comes down to. Do you need to finish OChem before you start prepping for the MCAT? Yes and no. Here's the reason why I say yes and no. OChem is on the MCAT, but it's not explicitly tested as much as it used to be, because it's tested in the biochemistry. Biochemistry is written in the language of organic chemistry. So you need to know the OChem in order to be able to do the biochemistry. So that's really kind of where the OChem is going to ultimately be needed as far as this is concerned. So that's where I would put that, as it were. Ellie asked another good question. Do you recommend students time themselves when practicing questions or start off untimed, or start off with the test time limits? My take on things, and this is true not just for the MCAT, it's true for all things in life. You have to get good at doing something before you can get good at doing something quickly. Right? So if I gave you a target and I said, throw this dart at that target, and you tried to throw it real hard and real fast and in succession repeatedly, you'd miss the target every single time. But if you slowly worked on the technique, I'm not a dart player, but bear with me if you are. If you've slowly worked on the technique and learned how to properly throw the dart so you're always hitting the bullseye, then you can start to speed up and do it more consistently, more quickly, and more efficiently. So yes, early days, you're not worrying about timing. So you got to get good at it, and then you got to get good at it in the amount of time that they give you, as far as as far as the test is concerned, as far as the timing that they give you on the exam. Yeah. These are good questions. I'm happy. I'm asking all these great questions. I've kind of alluded to this as far as kind of building out a plan and not going it alone. The reason why I'm here, quite simply put, why I'm here at med school headquarters, is because we are now, med school headquarters, as most of you probably already know, has been providing phenomenal medical school admissions consulting services for years. We are now providing MCAT tutoring and MCAT test prep services, and that also includes academic tutoring. So, if it's something that you're looking for in general as far as academics is concerned, or if there are content areas that you haven't yet had as far as the MCAT, that is what brings me here. We have built a phenomenal team of tutors who are all, they've all scored, their MCAT scores are all phenomenal, but even more so, I'm very picky about who I bring on board as far as a faculty team is concerned. They are all incredibly amazing at breaking down complex topics into simple, digestible tasks and analyzing and building plans so that students aren't kind of going off track as far as their preparation is concerned. Our program is a little bit different in the sense that we are, one, completely student-centered. And what I mean by that is every single student we build the program based on what their individual needs are, right? So we don't have, like the big companies, we don't have a program that you have to fit into. We build the program around your needs, right? So based on the questions you were asking earlier, I haven't taken biochem. What can I do? No problem. We can tutor you on the biochem that you need to know for the MCAT, and then get you up to speed on that, right? Or I haven't done the physics, or I haven't done this. So we build it around every single student. So that's literally what we're doing day in and day out. Everything is kind of built off of this bespoke model. So you have this coach. We treat it very much like any other patient case is concerned, right? When you get to med school, you'll go through something called problem-based learning. That's how most medical schools will teach these days, or that's how they teach. So we take a very, very similar approach, kind of long-term mastery building, so that you're not just memorizing a fact, but you're actually learning how to apply that content, apply that information to the next time that you ultimately see it. Everything is online. Everything is, in a live environment. So if that's something that, that you would like to find out more about, there's a QR code here. If not, we'll have lots of free information on our website in the months to come. So there's always going to be more. But yeah, so it's just really kind of a very, very student-centric approach, if you will, as far as preparing for this exam. So if that's something that you're looking to do, by all means, do let us know, and be more than happy to connect with you as far as finding out more about all those options that are available to you. That being said, I mentioned this already. We do have our admissions consulting team, which is also phenomenal. So there's another QR code if you're interested in kind of working with somebody as far as essays and brainstorming and interviews and all the preparation stuff for getting into med school post MCAT. That's also available to you there as well. But I'll open it up to any questions that we have. We got like 4 minutes left. So any questions anybody has, feel free to type them in. Other than that, hopefully you got a good sense of kind of what you need to be doing between now and when you go and take the exam. If you haven't already, please register for the exam. If you're planning on taking it in 2025, at least, register now for it. Registration's been open for a while, so important to make sure that you do that. Other than that, you're all very welcome. I see a bunch of thank yous coming in, so you're all very welcome indeed. But if you got any final questions, please do let me know. We'll get them answered for you along the way. You're all very welcome. And this will be posted on YouTube, so we'll get this recording out so you can find it again if there's something you want to go back to. There'll be something you can find accordingly. Hopefully everybody has a great rest of your evening, great week. And, we'll have more of these. So we're gonna have another event coming up in May. A little bit different from tonight. Won't be more about the MCAT itself, not just the overall study plan. So come to that one. Zachary, depending on, so you said you're doing a post-bachelor master's program. Are they covering, have you completed your prereqs? Like your thank you, Pam. I appreciate that. I'll let everyone know. Zachary, back to your question. I was distracted by Pam's wonderful comment. Have you completed your prereqs, or is this a program where you'll be taking those prereq classes in the program? Because if it's the latter, then I would say wait until you're done with the program, right? All right, so you'll complete your prereqs in December, but you'll finish the program in June or May next year. You'll have the bachelor's in bio. Yeah, so if you're done with the prereqs at that point, I would say then the ideal time to take the MCAT is as soon as you finish the prereqs, then go study for the MCAT so the material's fresh in your head. Yeah, if you were, if you weren't going to be done with the material, then I'd say, well, wait, but this way, yeah, if you're going to be done with it, that'll be great. If I were to highlight my top 5 tips for summer boot camp, what would those be? Well, I think we covered those tips. I'll summarize in one sentence. Build out a plan that you can adjust, and at the same time, make sure that you are incorporating content review, but not letting the content review dominate content review or dominate the prep, but using practice questions and the application of the material to drive your preparation before leading into full length exams. All right, that's the key to all of it. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I said this at the beginning, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it as many times as anybody wants to hear it. Focus on getting more questions right. End of story is what it comes down to, right? Just focus on getting more questions right and figuring out what it takes to get more questions right. That's going to be the key. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll close out the room. You're all very, very welcome indeed. I'm glad you found this helpful. Please stay tuned for more from us here at Med School headquarters. We look forward to working with you to work towards getting that white coat. Take care, everybody. Have a good evening.